Hi guys, hope everyone's well and welcome back to the Improvement Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the basics of building muscle and everything you need to know to build a good chunk of muscle when you're starting out, or even if you're intermediate and advanced. It will still go over the fundamentals to stop you getting distracted with things that won't actually give you a lot of return for your investment. And the reason why I'm creating this podcast is there's a lot of people out there posting content that yes is beneficial, is good, but what sells on Instagram, what sells on social media isn't repeating the fact that you need to progress your lifts, eat sufficient protein, etc. That's what gets results. If that's what people post, they wouldn't get a lot of views, they wouldn't get a lot of likes, they wouldn't get a lot of clicks. Whereas what actually builds tissue is doing basic principles very, very well. And it's easy to get distracted on some fancy exercise, some fancy training split, to the extent that you forget what actually yields results, what matters most when it comes to physique development. So, in this episode, I'm going to talk about the basics and the things that will give you the biggest return for your investment when it comes to building muscle. And as a result, stop you spinning your wheels, stop you getting distracted, stop you focusing on the things that won't give you a lot of return for your investment. And the I'm going to first of all touch on training. So, when it comes to training, what's going to matter most is performing a split that you can adhere to, simply meaning one you can repeat over a long period of time. And the reason being is if you're missing sessions, what that will basically mean is the next time you go to kind of do that movement, you will not be used to doing that movement pattern. You won't have the skill acquisition acquired to it because you've missed it the week prior, which makes it harder to hit. And I see it time and time again with both personal training and online coaching clients. If you give someone a split that they can't stick to, they won't try as hard to actually stick to it. They won't put the effort in to hit the sessions, and it will just lead to you getting demotivated and a lack of enjoyment for the process and a lack of effort when it comes to hitting your training. Whereas if you have something that's sustainable that you can stick to, you're more likely to actually get more sessions in. And because you're not missing planned sessions, your ability to progress your lifts over time will be greater. Additionally, what you'll find is you'll you'll hit all your sessions, and what that will do is that will create a sense of enjoyment, motivation, and it will reinforce you're the individual that hits your sessions, that adheres to training over time. Whereas if you're opposite, it's going to be quite discouraging, if that makes sense, and just lead to a lack of enjoyment and a lack of attempting to try. So yeah, what matters most is again adherence when it comes to your training, and training to failure or close to it. What I mean by that is making sure your last reps are moving very, very slow, so at a very, very slow pace. And when I say that, it should be involuntary, meaning you shouldn't attempt to make your reps slow at the end. It should be without any intent to slow them down. They'll naturally move very slow because you're at that failure point, because you're getting to the point where your reps are moving really, really difficult. And that's how you know you're close to failure, and you're basically pushing to that appropriate level of effort. The reason we want our reps to slow is when our reps slow towards the end, that's when we're recruiting as much muscle as we possibly can to move the weight. A good way to think about it is imagine you're pushing a car, it's stuck in snow, and you're pushing it, and it's just not moving. So you then recruit more and more muscle fibers, or in this case, people to push the car because it's really difficult to move. It's not going. You get more and more neighbours in your street to push the car out your snow. In other words, you recruit more and more muscle fibers, and as a result, stimulate more and more muscle fibers to move that load, or in other words, the car, if that makes sense. Bit of a bad analogy, but you get the drift. When we are really close to failure, when the reps are moving really, really slow, that's when our body will recruit as much muscle fibers and as a result stimulate as much muscle fibers as possible, which is why effort is so important. And what I'd say is your failure probably not your definition of failure probably not what failure actually is, and what's failure to you will not be failure to you 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, if you're training right and correctly and your efforts in a good spot. What I mean by that is failure something that should change over time with our effort improving, with our intensity improving, we should be able to kind of push ourselves further to further. I've seen it time and time again when I train with people and get online clients in for a session. Like they're they think they're training to failure, but I can then get another 5 reps out of them, sometimes more. So we know the reps close to failure are the stimulative reps. Let's say the last 5. So if someone's leaving 5 reps in the tank, think about what they are leaving on the table in terms of progression. And what's also important is like logbooking your lifts and progressing them over time. The reason behind logbooking your lifts is, see if you wanted to control your nutrition, you track it. See if you wanted to control your finances, what would you do? You track it. Then why wouldn't you do that with your training? A lot of people will, yeah, track their nutrition, they'll track other areas, etc., and they'll track their finances when they're trying to measure their finances. But with their training, they just go by feel, which makes absolutely zero sense, especially unless you have a lot of experience under your belt. If someone's been training for 10 years, 5 years, and they've built that baseline of knowledge, skill, they know where failure actually is, they've got a good understanding of their body, then yes, fair enough, move away from logbooking your lifts. But if you aren't at that level yet, logbook your lifts, look what you got last week, aim to progress upon that in the upcoming week and repeat that process, and that's how you build muscle. And also control your reps for many reasons, some of which being injury prevention, your ability to stay accurate and keep that load on the target muscle, your ability to get more from your work as a result of that, and as a result get better results. And additionally, use a large range of motion, meaning don't just do like partial reps in the bottom half or the top half of the movement. What matters most is training in that middle and lengthened position, or the middle position and the stretched position of a muscle's length, which means that's where we should primarily bias our movements. But it's going to be, I'm not going to go through what's the stretch, what's the shortened position, or the muscle length for every single movement. But for the most part, use a large range of motion, and that will be half the battle there as well. So that's the things that matter most with training. Using a split you can adhere to over time, training to failure or close to it, making sure you logbook your lifts and have good execution. And from there, the split you choose obviously matters, but what matters most is again adherence, progressing over time, etc. What I'd say is a good rule of thumb is if you're training just starting out, training 3 days a week, full body's not a bad idea. If you're training 4 days a week, doing upper lower is not a bad idea. If you're training 5 or more, do upper lower rest, or you can do push pull legs upper lower. But again, what matters most is doing something consistently and getting strong at it. As for the nutrition side of things, so what matters most with nutrition is making sure we're having a sufficient amount of calories and protein. First of all, in terms of protein, we want round about 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. You might not need 2 grams per kilogram, you might get away with slightly less, but higher is not a bad thing. There's little downside of having more protein, if that makes sense. Like, you're not gonna have too much protein and your kidneys aren't gonna shut down, and you're not gonna not build muscle as a result of that. The only time where having too much protein can be detrimental is if it affects digestion, or if it limits your ability to adhere to your calorie intake, or if it means you're not getting a sufficient amount of carbs and fats. For example, if someone's protein's that high that they don't have enough carbs and fats in their diet, then they might not have maybe good performance, good energy levels, good hormonal health. So yeah, ideally have 2 grams per kilogram your body weight of protein, and just eat relatively healthy. I've very, very rarely seen someone eat relatively healthy, get enough protein, and then their carbs and fats being in a crazy spot, meaning being really high or really low. Usually, see if you have enough protein, your carbs and fats will fall into a reasonable spot themselves. So I usually don't prescribe a goal for it, not out of laziness, just you do not need it. It's just an unnecessary level of restriction, especially if you're just starting out. You do not need to hit a certain amount of carbs, certain amount of fats. It's shown in literature results are similar to like a high fat, low fat diet and a high carb, low fat diet, or sorry, high carb, low carb diet. So yeah, take your pick. Obviously, once you get more advanced, does it matter more? I'd say so, yes, but you still don't need to stress too much about it. And also, once protein intake's established, make sure you're eating enough calories to gradually take your body weight up. If you don't know how much calories that is for yourself, simply eat the same amount of calories for a week, weigh yourself, see what your body weight does. If your body weight doesn't go up, eat more. If your body weight does go up, keep eating that. If it goes up excessively, eat a bit less and just add 100 calories or take away 100 calories accordingly. And in terms of if you don't track calories, you don't need to track calories to actually take your body weight up or to lose weight or gain weight. It can give you greater accuracy over it. However, if you are quite consistent with what foods you eat daily, if you follow some sort of meal plan or you eat very similar on a day-to-day basis, you can just eat what you're eating. And if you're not losing weight or you're not gaining weight, just eat a bit more consistently. Or if you are gaining weight or gaining too much weight, just eat a bit less consistently. And also, you don't need to overcomplicate it. Eat healthy, drink enough water so that your urine is clear or close to clear. That's a good sign that you're hydrated effectively, and get your 5 a day in. And in terms of the water intake, if you want like a number, 3 liters isn't a bad idea to start if you're male at least, or 2 liters at least if you're female. And as for what will give you the biggest return investment in regards to recovery, it's not going to be any magic supplement, it's not going to be any magic protocol, meditation, whatever. It's going to be sleeping 7 to 9 hours and also putting habits in place to improve your sleep, not just focusing on sleep duration but also sleep quality. So doing things like getting sunlight in the morning, limiting sunlight in the evening, making sure room's cool, as dark as possible, as quiet as possible at night, making sure that your bed's comfortable, and also doing things like just getting sunlight is good for our mental health and our stress management, which is also important for recovery because your body doesn't know the difference between recovering from a training stressor and some other stressor. Also, making sure that we have a good amount of general activity is not a bad idea. And you get obviously things like massage therapy, you get foam rolling, saunas, cold exposure. That's just like the icing on the cake. It's gonna do very little in terms of your recovery, to be fair. Like, it's just marginal gains, you could say, at that point. The biggest needle movers is going to be sufficient protein, calories, timing your calories around your session, and having good sleep, having good stress management, and staying hydrated pretty much. And it's about doing the boring stuff I've basically covered to a very high level. This podcast probably won't be that exciting and won't get a ton of clicks because I'm not talking about lengthened partials. I'm not talking about using a cuff for the perfect exercise for your chest. But that stuff just distracts you from what matters most. What matters most is what I've covered in this episode. Like, and success leaves clues. Look at people who are really big and strong. What do they do in common? Pretty much what I've said in this episode. They don't all do one certain exercise, they all don't do one certain split. It's just training stupidly hard over a long period of time. And you'll see a lot, again, of things on social media of like, oh, the best training split, or do this, do that to build muscle. Bear in mind, when we think about people's aim on social media, obviously people want to have a positive impact and inform you, but people also want to make money. People also want to get clicks on their video. They want to get views. They want to retain people's attention, and see if people just say, just train hard, eat well, take your body weight up gradually over time, make sure you're having sufficient amount of protein, etc. That's not going to like move someone forward in terms of their social media presence as much as giving someone something fancy to talk about or discuss, etc. So bear that in mind. That what I've basically went over, if you do all of those things to a very high standard and execute that to a very high level and do that over years, that's going to be 85% of it. Obviously, it's just a random figure off the top of my head, but that's going to give you the most return for your investment and what's going to be the most impactful on your results. So, and if you're a regular listener of this podcast, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing it monthly and make more time to do YouTube content, just because I'll think a lot of people want to see a bit more YouTube content in comparison to podcasts. However, if you do want to see the podcast more often, give me incentive to do it more often. Give it a like, give it a share, comment on the video, show some support, and tell me you like and listening and watching the podcast to give me more incentive to keep them coming out. And yeah, any support's massively appreciated. And again, if you're interested in online coaching or personal training, feel free to reach out. I've got an online coaching application in my bio, and I'm currently taking on clients when I'm recording this. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day, and thanks very much for watching or listening.